Dear learners, welcome to the first class of the week in which we are focusing on analyzing the need for registration under GST purview and the circumstances under which a dealer should register compulsorily, and also we are going to analyze the benefits of voluntary registration. To trace the taxpayers and to verify their compliance with the provisions and rules under GST registration of the dealer is most important. If the dealer is not registered under the GST purview, then it is impossible to collect tax from such persons, and also he cannot be able to claim the input tax paid on the input used by him during the supply of goods or services or both. The registration with GST authorities by the dealer will provide a unique identification number which helps for both government and taxpayers. Such number is known as GSTN. GST number. For government, it will help in identification of dealer and collecting the tax, whereas for taxpayers, it will help in claiming input tax credit. So, every dealer whose turnover exceeds the threshold limit, then his registration under GST regime is mandatory, and failure or violation of rules in this regard attracts penalty and severe legal consequences. Why should a dealer register with GST authority? The dealer should register with GST authorities for the purpose of obtaining following merits. Firstly, it helps the dealer to recognize himself as supplier who is supplying goods or services or both in a legal manner. By the registration under GST, dealer will get the power to collect tax from customers on behalf of government and also to claim the credit on the tax already paid by him on the inputs used during the supply. It creates the confidence among the customers and public as well on the business of the dealer. If the dealer is registered under GST, then he will be eligible for making applications for government bids or auctions or contracts or tenders or any other assignments. One registration for one state. Under GST regime, the registration is granted for every dealer based on the principle of one registration, one state, which means there is only one registration for the dealer in a particular state. However, this principle is an exception for the following cases. A dealer can get multiple numbers of registration for his separate business vertically. A dealer acting as an input service distributor and also involves in outward supply of goods or services or both. Compulsory registration under Section 22, Subsection 1 of CGST Act 2017. Every supplier of goods or services or both shall be liable for registration under GST purview when his aggregate turnover in a financial year exceeds the threshold limit. This condition is not applicable for the special category of states. Threshold limit of aggregate turnover for registration under GST purview. The threshold limit for registration is different for the supplier who involving in supplying goods and in supplying services. As per the 32nd meeting of GST Council, which was held on 10th January 2019, the threshold limit of aggregate turnover for registration by supplier who involving in supply of goods is Rs 40 lakh or Rs 20 lakh as decided by the respective states. For a supplier of services, the threshold limit of aggregate turnover for registration by supplier is Rs 20 lakh. Where supplier is operating in special category states, then threshold limit of aggregate turnover for registration is Rs 10 lakh. Here it is important to note that there would be two threshold limit of aggregate turnover for claiming exemption for registration under GST purview, that are Rs 40 lakh or Rs 20 lakh, and state governments are having the option to decide any one of the threshold limit mentioned earlier. For the purpose of registration under GST purview, special category of states are the states which are listed below: Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim, Tripura, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. Circumstances on which the dealer is liable to be registered under GST compulsorily, Section 24 of CGST Act 2017. The circumstances on which a person compulsorily to be registered under GST irrespective of their turnover are any person involving in making interstate taxable supply of goods or services, any casual taxable persons who involving in supplying taxable supply of goods or services, any person who is required to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism, any person who is supplying goods or services as electronic commerce operator and required to pay GST, any person who is non-resident taxable dealer involving in supplying taxable goods or services, any person who is required to deduct tax under the Act and whether or not separately registered under CGST Act 2017, any person who involves in supplying taxable goods or services or both on behalf of other taxable person either as an agent or in any other manner, any person who is carrying business as input service distributor, any person who involves in supplying online information and database access or retrieval services from outside India to person who in India other than a registered person, any other person notified by the government on the recommendation of the GST Council. Example: Sharda Cycles Limited provides the following details with respect to supply made by them are: interstate exempt supply of services Rs 2,28,500, interstate taxable supply of goods of Rs 3,46,000, non-taxable supply of goods Rs 2,38,000, exempted supplies Rs 1,32,000, zero rated supplies Rs 38,000. Determine the aggregate turnover and advise whether the company is liable to be registered under GST or not. Determination of aggregate turnover of Sharda Cycles. The supplies to be included to calculate aggregate turnover of Sharda Cycles are: interstate exempt supply services 2,28,500, interstate taxable supply of goods 3,46,000, non-taxable supply of goods 2,38,000, exempt supplies 1,32,000, zero rated supplies 38,000. So, in total, the aggregate turnover is 9,82,500. In this case, the aggregate turnover of Sharda Cycles Limited is Rs 9,82,500 and they are compulsorily needed to register under GST. Even their aggregate turnover is less than the threshold limit because they are involved in interstate taxable supply of goods and which is necessary for registration under GST as per Section 24 of the CGST Act 2017. Voluntary registration under GST purview. The dealer who is not liable for registration under GST on mandatory basis also can register under GST on voluntary basis. Once the dealer received the registration on voluntary basis, then all the provisions of GST law will be applicable to him. After voluntary registration, the dealer must commence business within 6 months from the effective date of registration. Otherwise, his registration will be cancelled by the respective GST officer. Benefits of voluntary registration under GST. If the dealer registered under GST on voluntary basis, then he will enjoy the following benefits which are listed. He will recognize himself as an authorized supplier of goods or services and which helps in build the confidence among the customers. He can provide input tax credit to his customers because he can issue taxable invoice on the purchase of goods by the customers. Voluntary registration will make the dealer as more competitive as compared to small business houses who are not registered under GST because any goods or services purchased from registered person will ensure the input tax credit. He can also get the benefit of ITC on own purchases on their input services such as legal fees, consultation fees and so on. He can also undertake interstate sales without any restrictions and legal barriers. Registration in case of transfer of business. If the registered business under GST transferred from one person to another, then the transferee of the business shall be liable for registration under GST. The business can be transferred on various reasons or circumstances which are as under. The business carried by registered person is transferred on the account of succession or any other reason to another person as a going concern, then the transferee is liable for registration under GST from the date on which such transfer or succession is taken place. If the business of the company is transferred on the account of amalgamation or demerger of two or more companies' businesses, then such transferee company is liable for registration under GST from the date on which the registrar of the companies grants the certificate of incorporation of such company. Maximum time limit for registration under GST. The maximum time limit for the dealer who becomes liable for registration under GST is 30 days from the date on which he becomes liable for registration. If the dealer is casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person, then he shall be made application at least 5 days before the commencement of his business. This ends the discussion of first class of the 11th week. In the next class, we are going to focus on the threshold limit of aggregate turnover and the manner of determination of the same for the purpose of knowing the eligibility of a dealer for registration under GST purview. Thank you.